with Hayk in Los Angeles, California. Hayk has called into the show before. Hayk, how's it going?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Great.
Cool. So what did you want to talk to us about today?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about free will, and more specifically, like when we're thinking about society and how we, like what kind of society we would want to live in. Do we consider free will, or like how do we go about talking about free will? Like how does free will play into that?
Interesting. What do you think? I mean, I don't know if this is really your forte or how much you do on the research on this, but I mean, obviously, you know. So.
Well, I've read a lot on the whole subject.
Of course.
Hayk, I'm not sure we have a final answer, but I'll tell you what my answer is.
Mm-hmm.
I think as human beings, we have a finite capacity in our brains, and we have choices we can rationally make. But I think we way overestimate how much choice we really do have in life. And if on a scale of 1 to 100, let's say that I believe I've got 90, I have 90 points of choice in my life. The fact is I probably only have about 30 points, so to speak. It's like we all have tunnel vision. And when we have tunnel vision, the parts that are outside of our tunnel vision can't even be considered as a part of our choice, right? I mean, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So, I'm looking through. I'm putting if you can see the television, I'm like a blinders on a horse. Well, the horse has choices. If you think of a horse race, the horse has choices about where to run or how to go, but only within that limited framework, because outside of that framework, they have no information. And I think we as humans, our blinders are like this, but our brains are very good at deceiving us into thinking our blinders are this big. I think everybody would agree that we have some blinders on. I think most people don't know how restricted the blinders are. For example, if you were raised in a Christian environment, your blinders are going to be so tight, you will probably never be able to understand how a Muslim could ever believe what they believe. That a guy could ride a horse to heaven. That just makes no sense at all. And yet, the Muslim's sitting there with his blinders on and saying, how could you ever believe a guy could walk on water and rise from the dead? I mean, those are just equally crazy ideas, but each side has got their blinders on. They can't see beyond that. So what do we mean by free choice? I think we do have choice, but it's within that small, much narrower set of blinders than what we really think we have. Most Christians think, I've got free will, I've got all these choices. And I say, well, if you have all those choices, why didn't you become a Mormon? Why didn't you wake up one day and say, I think I'm going to try out Buddhism? No, they always try Christianity, or they always try the Baptist, because that was what they were raised in. Mm-hmm. So they've already, as early as 3 or 4 years old, the blinders are really not restricting down your viewpoint. And you may never be able to get out of that. So I'm talking here. What do you think?
So, to use a secular example of this, look at people who are smoking today versus people who were smoking maybe 50 years ago.
Right, yeah.
Why were there more people smoking back then than there are right now? Now, vaping, that's a whole other thing, right?
Yeah.
But, like, what was society's messaging at the time? I mean, it was all over TV. Big, famous names were using it. It became kind of a cultural thing. I mean, we still have the same access to cigarettes that anybody did 50 years ago, yet we've seen a shift in our behaviors and habits. Why is that? And that's because we do have influences outside of us that are contributing to our decisions, and to have like this libertarian idea of we're completely free of all outside influences and it's just us making these choices, I don't think is realistic when you look at human cultures and the trends that people come to. The God virus talks about this kind of a little bit in the sense that Christianity is something that is spread, and other kinds of ideas are spread, and our ideas of what free will are and how much choice we have is also spread in this context. I know that, I think you can vouch for me in this, in that people's self identity and how much choice they think that they have over their lives does have a correlation to problems with addiction and problems with those kinds of recovery, right? Like people who don't feel like they have as much choices in their lives, feel like that there's a lot of things that are on top of them that they can do otherwise, are more prone to those kinds of problems, right?
Exactly.
Right. And so even your mentality on what you think about free will and what you think about your choices has an effect on the kind of choices that you're making, right? So it's something that we need to take into account. We have to acknowledge. I wish more people would acknowledge, hey, we're being constantly fed all kinds of messages every single day, and we don't even realize it. And wish we were just more sensitive to that. And rather than having this idea of, well, you just need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps and just do everything yourself, because that's just not how people are. We function socially. We get our messages and ideas socially, and we need to just, I think, as a society, just integrate that better and recognize what kinds of messages we're receiving and where that's coming from. What do you think, Hayk?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think so. I don't believe in free will. I think I'm just a biological being moving around, taking in inputs and doing certain outputs. I think it's as simple as that. I mean, I obviously have this illusion of free will, and I have a consciousness, and I feel like I make these choices, but I think that's all it is, an illusion. I think even if
that's the language I would use. I meat computer is my terminology for that. But yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one. And I think even if somehow there is a soul and I am making these free choices, I think even with that, how much influence our environment has on us is so I think you said most people think it's 90% choice, but really you would say it's 30. I would go way less than that. I would say 1 point of free will or whatever.
Okay. So I was trying to be kind, but okay, I would not disagree with you, actually.
Okay, good.
I will say this, though. I think there's some evidence the more education you get, the greater that percentage gets, because education allows for choice that you wouldn't have otherwise. That's kind of obvious, but anyway. You might have 1% if you're a high school graduate. You might have 3% if you're a college graduate. I don't know, but you got more.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is assuming that we accept that free will does exist, which I still don't think it does.
Okay.
But so the reason I brought this up is that if we think, or if we accept that people don't have free will, right? Or at the very least, most of the choices they make are not choices that they actually make. They're just products of their environment. Can we really punish someone for let's say robbing a convenience store or whatever? Or should we structure society in a way that we don't punish people? And further than that, if we look at two people who is successful and then one who is, they're broke and their life is falling apart, and we say, the guy who's successful, they just made better choices throughout their life. Do they really, or is it more they're just a result of their environment and their biology and all that? So do they really deserve that success that they do have?
Right.
I have a response, but maybe you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, my first thing is, when we are having discussions like this, unfortunately, just saying things as free will is too black and white of a term for me, I think, because it doesn't acknowledge, to say, oh, do we have free will or not? That's too black and white for me. Us as an individual is much more complex in the sense of how we relate to our environment and stuff like that. And rightfully so, you've pointed this out. And I was just making the case, we're actually a lot more part of our environments than what people think. And I agree with you to the extent that I think our justice system in particular should take acknowledgement of that. There's other countries that already do this as far as their recidivism is lower in other countries because of the way that the actual prison systems and stuff work there. They're not trying to punish for revenge. They're trying to punish to kind of help people. And I wish that's how our society would function. So if that's the case you want to make, then yes. But if we're going to I think if we're going to say well, we don't have any choice at all, well, that gets a little bit complicated, because then we're just saying that society itself is the sole factor, but we are also part of that society. It's the individuals that also influence that society in ways. So it is a complex balance between the two. But as far as should we acknowledge this, and should we kind of make a more nuanced understanding of ourselves, especially in the way that we treat people and the way that we incarcerate them, yes, I would agree with you there.
I spent the first 10 years of my career as a clinical psychologist in the correctional system with mainly juveniles. So I've had to deal with this issue in that way, actually. And I think our criminal justice system is a crime in and of itself. So, yeah. Hayk, I'm rabidly against the way in which we administer so-called justice. It causes more crime than it ever solves. Punishing, you can't punish people into being good. You can't punish people into being moral. That's the dumbest idea. And yet it comes from very deep roots in the Puritan, generally speaking, the Puritan mentality that came over here in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. I call myself a Quaker atheist. And you may not know this, but Quakers were really big into prison reform. And much of the prison systems we've got now were kind of invented by the Quakers. Now, I'm not saying that's now a good thing, but at the time it was a big plus because they had a different philosophy than just punish people. And I think we need to kind of go back to the philosophy of punishment doesn't make people moral. Yeah.
That's a great slogan. I don't know why I've never thought of it that way. But yeah, punishment doesn't make people moral. You can't punish someone to be good.
Right.
Wow, what a profound little thought blurb there. I like that.
Yeah, well, you have to get out of our current political mindset to understand that certain parties that we're involved with in our national level seem to think that you can just kill people and they'll be better,
Yeah, and I think that's a bipartisan thing, by the way. I don't think...
I won't disagree with that.
Sure, I mean, if we're talking just we can't talk about specific politicians on this particular program, but I've definitely seen it happen on both sides as far as people like politicians who are hard on crime. They want to go down with these people and to stop the war on drugs and all this kind of stuff. And even though time and time again, when we look at these things, we show that this stuff like this war on drugs just doesn't work, right? Just our approaches on that. So we are about running out of time here, Hayk, but I do appreciate your call.
Great question. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks again for calling in again this week.
Yeah, thanks for taking a call. I love the show.
Thank you, Hayk. You are awesome, and we'll see you next time. Yep.